Good evening. I'm John Martin, the host of the show tonight, The Voice of Reason. We're reasonable people, but I'm going to do something different tonight. I'm going to have each individual introduce themselves in a way that they would like to hear it. Starting with you, Charlie.
I'm Dr. Charles Garabedian.
And Christopher Kirk.
Robert Koenig.
And John Martin, the retired guy, yeah. All right, I'm going to start the show tonight with a topic that was in the news. There was a lot of shootings around the country, and I wanted to pinpoint a little bit about safety that's now going to have be taken care of in our own town, either in the schools or in public places. And I'll start with this. I learned a number of things in the shootings that was brand new to me. One was an automatic weapon has a magazine of 100 rounds now.
Mm-hmm.
It just floored me.
Mm-hmm.
Our armies don't have magazines that big. But one of the things that came up on one of the shows this week in analyzing the shootings, one was if you're not going to change the control or ownership of war weapons, then you need to have the policemen have at least as good a weapon as they're up against.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to think about maybe spending some money for a bunch of officers in our town having magazines of 100 rounds. So they go in shooting.
Oh.
Now, it didn't take a machine gun to stop the guy in Texas, but it took 6 policemen.
Mm.
They were on site within 30 seconds of hearing the shots. And they came within 30 seconds later, the gunman was dead.
Mm.
Now, they just had pistols. They fired like 32 rounds at him before they hit him, before he went into this restaurant, which was a lot of people in there, about 50 people they said. And so they're now heroes. One comment made on TV was they were all new officers within 3 years, and they were really brave to charge after a guy with a machine gun. But fortunately, he was a bad shot, and that's good.
That's true.
Okay. The safety involved here is how do you stop somebody from bringing in a weapon of that size into any place of business or of school? Now, we had this talk a few years ago about how safe the schools were and how they were going to cover that at that time, which was put an alarm in, all the policemen empty out of the police station, they're not busy, and head for that school, and then they'll have a lot of, well, they keep their equipment, rifles and stuff, in their cars, so they bring a lot of firepower to the incident. But I don't think anybody's got a machine gun with 100 rounds in it yet. So we'll have to maybe rethink what safety is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it seems to me if policemen responded in Texas within 30 seconds, then maybe we need to have more policemen posted around so that you can get to whoever's shooting. I mean, let's face it, in a minute or two, they could have all their rounds shot,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people dead and or wounded. They had more wounded this weekend than dead, actually. They didn't get a good. They just sprayed it around, and not everybody died,
Yes.
but enough.
Mm.
I personally felt that every place of business should have guards, which some of them do have guards, but they don't have a gun. They may have something to pepper spray or something to slow somebody down if they're stealing something, but they don't have a gun. And the only way to stop a person with a gun at a distance is another gun. That's the only way to stop them at 50 feet, 100 feet, wherever they're shooting from. And so we need to start thinking about making places safer. And obviously the first step is policemen. There have been other communities since we had shootings about 3 years ago that actually allowed teachers to have a pistol and a holster, not displayed, but maybe under a jacket or something like that. And so I've always felt that the teachers have the right to protect themselves. And usually they're the first one shot too in these classrooms. So I think we just need to have more shooters in the vicinity of where it might happen. The second thing was they've hired veterans that just get out of the service. They were qualified in weapons, pistols and rifles. And I remember one place hired 3 of them to surround a building so that if something happened, they would be able to close on the problem with, they know how to use a weapon and be able to aim it in the right direction. And so we might want to consider something like that, which is something I think you might have to do in shopping. You can't go to a shopping mall nowadays without having 100, 500 people running around. And so there needs to be amongst that a mix of protectors. If we don't protect, they're gonna get shot. And it could happen anywhere. Now, why is it happening all over? They had a very good shows on TV trying to explain mental health problems. Something that the president did mention. And as it turns out, more of the shooters in the past decade have been found to be mentally ill. And they thought that was a big factor and for them taking the first shot. They were depressed or whatever. They just wasn't thinking straight and wasn't thinking about consequences. Most of these shooters usually die on the scene. Either they shoot themselves or they get shot by somebody that's coming in to save the rest of the people that aren't dead yet. So, how do we deal with mental health? Mental health is a problem because everybody does not have insurance to cover treatment. And so maybe we could have a pile of money within the town, maybe at the health department, with teachers recommending people to get screening, and then as soon as they fail something and need treatment, have another pot of money for them to go out and get services if they don't have their own insurance. And so, even though we're not covering all their ills, it would be one that would stop them from using the trigger finger. And that's what's important about these shootings, is that if they had done something with these persons earlier, if they had a warning sign, maybe it wouldn't happen. I think that there are not big gangs of these guys around with ideology towards killing people, but there are enough. One person made a statement on TV that the people that are involved in, try to get the name of the group.
ISIS?
No, the white guys.
Ku Klux
White
Klan?
supremacy.
Oh, white supremacists, yeah.
The white supremacists, they said all of them in the country could only fill up a football stadium. That's still a lot of people, but it's not like they're coming in groves of dozens or something to go shoot something up. These guys are usually operated independently because they've been programmed to do this. And unfortunately, they're believing it, that things will happen favorably for propaganda, that their message will get out better because they sacrificed their life for the cause. I don't like the cause, but we now have people saying that President Trump is a white supremacist. That was to change the story that started last week, that he's a racist. And before that, he was something else. And so he's getting all kind of mud thrown at him.
Mm-hmm.
No, but he said everything right this week. He didn't say anything off color. He had a speech written for him, and he said everything correctly. Now, people want him to say, I know the Democrats want him to say something more, like take away all guns. That's their bottom line. But he didn't say anything about guns because he's a firm believer in guns. Was it First Amendment? Second Amendment. And so he's constitutionally supporting guns, but there needs to be more responsibility somewhere in order to not be used as a war weapon on our population. What you got to say?
My thought is that I'm sure that the school department has looked at this. I'm sure they have a plan. I know they have locked doors, they have cameras. I don't believe they have metal detectors on the way in, and I don't believe they require the backpacks and whatever people bring to the schools to be visible through a clear backpack or a clear belt or something like that. And so they need to take a look at metal detectors, I think, are huge. And that would be for schools, public offices, libraries, and take the cue from the public sector, from the private sector. Because if you look at a casino, for one, they are very careful who they're letting in there. They know every license plate that drives up, it's caught on camera. So that's run right away. Is this someone who's been on this property before? Then they can do facial recognition. And then the fact that the metal detector will go off, you actually do need somebody standing in the area so they can do a check. What is it? Is this something that needs to be in the school, or is this something you gotta leave and take home right now? So the fact that I know our schools are looking at it, and I'm sure there are further steps that can be taken, whether it comes to the metal detectors, that's really the big one, and having monitors at the doors along with the cameras would also be beneficial. And it's not just for the schools, it's for the public buildings and also for the libraries, et cetera. Any thoughts, Chris?
I don't know exactly how this problem can be remedied. First of all, the people who usually do the shootings are sort of lone wolves. They don't have any girlfriends. They don't even have any male friends. They, if anything, they might post some manifesto on the internet, rambling with a lot of resentment. But beyond that, I mean, it would be convenient if prospective shooters had their skin turned green. Then you could just look and you'd know which ones. But I mean, one of the things you hear about these people after these shootings time and again is, he was such a quiet person, never caused any trouble, and how many times have you heard that? And I'm also a little skeptical about giving these guys mental health, because usually they don't think there's anything wrong with them. The problem is with you.
No, but if everybody got screened, they wouldn't know they're being picked on.
That's true. You might be. It'd be a big project trying to work on these. And the other thing is, you could protect places like schools where there have been students who, decide they're going to get revenge against their classmates for picking on them or whatever. But in other, in public places, a shopping mall or whatever, I don't know. I know, for example, in the emergency room down at UMass down by Lake Quinsigamond, they do have metal detectors and big burly guys there who will check you out if you don't pass the metal detector. So I don't know whether a shopping mall would want to have sort of like a siege mentality.
Well, they got these little things that when you leave the big stores,
Yeah.
you leave the tag in the clothes, it
The
goes
alarm
rings.
goes off.
And so all they have to do is improve that kind of system so that on the way in,
Yeah.
they could tell somebody's carrying big pieces of metal or something.
Yeah. That's a possibility, I suppose, but we're protecting ourselves against, I mean, these events are more rare than lightning strikes. And so it would be very difficult to protect ourselves against such a rare event unless,
It is. They had some shows on this past week that talked about how to prevent the rare event. These loners need to be attached to something. They were looking at, most people, well, a lot of people now don't go to church. So if they have God the Father, which is Christianity, then they'll be looking to them for guidance through the Bible. The second thing is, let's see.
I think one of the things these guys need is a girlfriend. I mean, really desperately.
Well, they think most of them need a father. There's a lot of divorces going on,
Yeah.
and so you gotta strengthen that area, or you're gonna lose that no matter what else you do.
It's the video game mentality also of it, where some of these games are just, you know.
Constant shooting.
You're on a gun. You're looking down a gun and you're going in different rooms. First thing you're doing is just shoot. And I literally know that there are people that play these games almost every waking moment that they
That
are.
puts them in isolation from other human beings.
Oh, yeah, they're very,
And therefore, you talk about depression. Of course, that's going to start. You have prompted me, I'm glad I'm number 4 here on the list. Where shall I start? Well, when we look at the weapons, if our federal government was serious about this, they would, without a blinking an eye, pass laws about the types of weapons that can be shown, that can be sold. I can't understand why the citizenry needs military weapons. Military weapons are designed to go kill people in other countries where there's wars. There is no war going on here. So why do citizenry need
Keep talking, I'm gonna take a break.
Go ahead, John.
And they haven't done that. And I don't know what it's gonna take for them to do that. Now, people say it's taking away the rights of the citizens. If, suppose I go and I hunt deer, why do I need
100 rounds?
100 rounds, a military-style weapon? So definitely they could take those right off the market, but there again, this boils down to money. The gun manufacturers through the NRA and probably they have other lobbying groups are saying, no, we
Well,
want.
I think one of
we want
the
our business.
apprehensions is, this is the thin edge of the wedge. You know, once you ban this one, then banning other things becomes easier.
Well, no, I don't, yeah,
That's
not
the argument.
I know, but I don't think it's gonna ever come to that. I mean, that doesn't mean that somebody can't have a pistol, but at the same time, the people that buy any kind of weapon, there has to be a much more thorough background check, much more thorough. When we talk about the Constitution, if you read the Constitution carefully, the Constitution does not say that the citizenry has a right to bear arms. It talks about the state's rights to bear arms, not the individuals. So a lot of that is misconstrued when they quote the Constitution. Do we have a right to bear arms? I guess we do, but now that we're facing this kind of a situation, it's different. And people will go back and say, well, at the beginning of this country, everybody had a gun. But the type of people we had then, the culture then, is totally different than the culture now. The culture then was very religiously based. Today, we don't have that anymore.
Well, the other thing is that there really wasn't any police force, there really wasn't any, it wasn't even a standing army.
No, there wasn't.
So basically, everybody had to have a gun
Right.
to be his own policeman and to be available for
And
army
they took
service.
care of each other. They really did. And I think that the definite lack of God in these people, a sense of moral conscience, how can you do that? I oftentimes say that if I'm driving on the road and I inadvertently hit a squirrel, I feel guilty. I feel terrible inside me. I just killed a squirrel. But that goes back to when I was 4 years old. That's the training. So we talked about morality. It's also the revenge of when students get angry in school about whatever. they don't know how to handle that anger. That comes from very, very early training and how they've been raised 4 or 5 years old. Another thing, influence on this is television and movies.
Oh, yeah.
Look at the movies today where they depict violent scenes and how different it was of the movies of 40, 50 years ago where you saw a violent scene. Today, the violent scene depicts every single aspect of that.
Yeah.
And I don't like to watch it. It just bothers me. Whereas before, I could watch a Western and see somebody get shot off a horse, but you really didn't see him fall. You didn't see the effect. And the injury was nothing more than a grazed arm.
Yes,
I can remember specific.
there were a lot of wounded shoulders
Just-
over
yeah,
the years.
and if you looked at the next scene, they were all better again. You know, they had that in this thing for a while, and then they were all better. So you knew that it wasn't reality. But today,
It's almost like luxuriating in it, glow,
exactly right.
you're just relishing it.
Exactly right. The other thing is the computers, the video games, all the technology that is putting people in isolation.
Oh, yes, very definitely.
So I can see that when they get into isolation, they don't feel connected to anybody. They lose touch with human beings, so they get depressed. And then maybe anger sets in. They say, now I'm gonna get my revenge. And they go ahead and they do something terrible. When we look at the schools, as an educator, I don't feel that it is my job, that's not my profession, to be a policeman. I would never carry a weapon. That's not my job. It is not my job to defend the students against somebody holding a gun. It might be my job as a teacher to pick up my students about anybody that's verbally accosting them. I have to do something about that. In terms of gun protection, I don't think. I think what we have to do, if you carry it to the full force, we're gonna need police in every school, armed police. Keep those doors locked, have surveillance cameras, and to enter and leave that building, you will undergo thorough scrutiny just like they do at UMass. Every day, I think every student has to be searched. But again, why does a student come to the school with a gun? Where are the parents,
They've probably stolen the gun from the parents.
right? And if they were able to steal the gun from the parents, that means that the parents are not responsible people, that gun was under triple lock and key, where the key is hidden someplace that nobody knows. It'd be that tight. You know, I believe that's
Because
so-
these weapons are coming from black markets, they're coming from the military,
right.
excess military that people have, they're not in the military anymore, somehow they got their gun home, or a few guns they've gotten out of the military, so,
Well, the other thing is, most of the, one of the most shocking things about these shootings is that many times the shooter bought his gun legally. So he went through the background check, everybody checked him out, and he goes away with an AK-47 or,
There shouldn't even be available. I mean, nobody takes, and that's just for military use only. That you just need tighter controls on the type of weapon. And that's not saying you take away a BB gun from somebody.
the problem is now, there's so many guns on the streets.
Yeah.
So there needs to be either a buyback program or a confiscation program of these AKs, automatic weapons.
Unfortunately, Rob, I think that the horse has lost the barn. It's gonna be we should have been thinking about this many, many years ago, when all these weapons were just the freedom that we have. People don't realize that when we have freedoms, for every freedom, you have a responsibility. And people are ignoring the responsibility, unfortunately. And that's one of the ways, and it's just not the people, it's the entire culture. Every part of our society has ignored this. Say you're free to do what you want, go ahead and do it. Go back to academics for a minute. For some reason, I'm gonna talk about this. But it's the same attitude in terms of how they do out their mathematics. They'll do it out incorrectly, but somehow they get a correct answer. And I'll say, no, that's not acceptable. They will tell me, but that's how I do it. They have the feeling that whatever they do is okay. The parents will support this. I've come across many cases where they would come in and say, well, that's how my child does it. And I'm saying, no, that's not what is to be done. It has to be done this way. I've had administrators support the parents and the child.
Really?
Oh, yes. So it's a cultural thing that whatever we do, it's okay. And I'm afraid that's not the case for any of us in anything that we do,
Mhm.
for anything that we do.
Discipline is a dirty word nowadays.
Yes, it is, yeah, yeah.
Well, before we run out of time, we've got a few minutes left, I wanted to have Chris talk a little about a public service project that will be going on this weekend.
Oh. Well, probably it'd be a little late by the time this show airs, but
It's later tomorrow.
yeah, this is there's a park which is, you've probably driven by it hundreds of times and never even noticed it. It's at the intersection of Prospect Street and 140, of 78 acres of wooded land with a sign at the entrance that says Prospect Park. And this Saturday between 9 and 12, the people will be showing up to tidy the place up. So we're hoping for a good turnout and invite anybody who's watching to show up. And if you can bring along some tools, wheelbarrows, clippers and so forth, that'd be most welcome. Warm bodies especially welcome though.
So you're gonna be able to drive right up this time, the gates are gonna be open.
We will be opening the gate so you can just drive straight in.
And it's just a historic piece of property in this town, going back years and years.
Oh, yeah. It was originally the estate of Mr. Matthew Woodall, who owned a big carpet company down where, just across the 290 from Holy Cross College. And it's now, I think it's Rotman's Furniture.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
That's where he had his carpet mill, and his summer place was up there on the hill, and we're going to be cleaning up what used to be his little rose garden. And unfortunately, after a long period of neglect, it needs a lot of work. So, as I said, warm bodies are welcome.
There's a beautiful pergola up there,
Yes.
a viewing type of pond that's
Yeah.
no longer in use, but you can still see the,
Oh, yes, there was a reflection
The
pond in the middle of
reflection.
their rose garden, so if you sat in this little pergola, this little trellised area, you could look at the, look into the reflecting pool, and you'd see a reflection of the house, their mansion on the hill, so. It was very nice in its day, and the property was clear-cut, so you could stand around in the garden and look down as far as Lake Quinsigamon if you wanted to, so. Trying to restore a little tiny bit of the old grandeur of that property.
Are we ever gonna have a well in that property?
A well. The plan was to put a well on that property for a while, but it wasn't gonna be a terribly productive well. And they decided to put a well where they would probably get a better rate of production of. But the well, the test well that they dug is still up there. It's kept, but I think the plan is for putting another municipal water well in there is sort of more or less been abandoned.
Well, I thought it was abandoned as soon as they lost, how many trails was it?
Well, the complaint is that they lose about a third of the water that they pump out of the ground, and if they could stop that they wouldn't need a well.
Yeah, that's all the water we need, right?
Yes.
And it's time to say goodnight from the Voice of Reason.